Welcome back to Toys on Tap. This week is another incredible week. We have Quang coming on from Creature Bazaar, and he is this week and next week. He's talking all about his life in episode 1. Episode 2 is all about Creature Bazaar and what's to come with that. If you want more Toys on Tap, you can like, follow, rate, review wherever you get podcasts. It's free for you. It means the world to me. And it helps us get to more ears because the algorithm, the bloody algorithm that we all give out to and we all worship, if you like, if you subscribe, if you rate and review, it gets out to more people and they think it's a popular show, which it is. If you want to support the show even more, you can follow us on all socials at Toys on Tap. And if you even want to jump on even more and talk through what it looks like to sponsor an episode, send us a DM, let us know. We'd love to have you on as a sponsor. Now let's get to this week's episode of Toys on Tap. Let's rock this. I'm pumped that you're on. We've been talking about doing this for a little bit. I mean, we had one at the end of SummerSlime to kind of talk about it, get thoughts, wrap up, all the good stuff. And we had talked about it since then, which was last year, about us getting you on to kind of talk through your story and then talk through Creature Bazaar as a secondary part to that. So this starts the 2-part story, which I'm really excited for. So, I mean, the best way to kick it off, introduce yourself, tell us who you are, what you do.
I'm Quang Lee. I'm a co-owner of Creature Bazaar. Yeah, that's kind of it.
That's you do so much more than just co-own Creature Bazaar, but we're gonna get to it all.
No, I mean, there's a lot of stuff in my, I guess, it all intertwines in a fun way, you know, where my life, Creature Bazaar, like my work life, everything, it's all just intertwined in a crazy way.
Yeah. But we'll get to Creature Bazaar, but I want to hear about little Quang growing up, the toys you had, the cartoons you were watching, like your childhood that kind of shapes you as the creative and who you are today.
Yeah. I mean, I think I was actually going to ask you, has there ever been a guest that's come on that hasn't said that they liked Ninja Turtles?
I've had a couple. I mean, I had like 2 growing up, but there's been a couple. I don't know. Maybe there was a couple that didn't have them. I don't think anyone has said they didn't like them.
Right.
Yeah.
No, I mean, I think that all of our histories are sort of very similar in this sort of industry, and you know, mine is no different. I think the part that was a little different for me is that our public access had a lot of like the Japanese shows like Mazinger Z, the Getter Robo shows, they called them the Star Avengers over here, or Transwar Z, and the Japanese super robots. But I guess I wouldn't figure out that they were essentially like Japanese shows till much later. Like they were just cartoons to me.
Yeah.
And then, you know, and then it gets into like Robotech. And then the Rankin and Bass stuff that all had sort of like an anime flair, but those were like American productions, like Thundercats and Silverhawks and things like that. But I was always sort of attracted to all of those things, even though I really didn't know what they were, and because I would sort of go to a lot of like, you know, growing up, I would go to Asian markets with my family and things like that, and I'd see all these import style toys. But you know, I think I was similar to a lot of different kids that liked like G.I. Joe, Transformers, Turtles, and things like that. You know,
I think you just said something that I didn't know. Did Rankin Bass do Thundercats?
Yeah. It was their show.
That's wild. I don't know why this is. I only attribute them to the claymation Christmas movies.
Yeah, all the stop motion stuff. They were really cool about just sort of like taking these strange things and like making them like as producers, because they were always kind of like hired on to make things for like the Rudolph the Red-Nosed Reindeer was like a special that was hosted every year by I think like probably like Maytag or something like that, or like other companies would pay for them to make these things. Just like with I think Thundercats, it was like that show was like bought and then broadcasted. It was something that they had paid, produced, made, and then they just sold it to like networks.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I did not know that. That's crazy. I mean, growing up, having those influences, is it because like what was the draw to those versus like the Japanese style versus anything else? What was that draw for you?
Probably the violence. I don't know.
Yeah.
The style. I mean, when you think of animation, there's like the Filmation stuff, which is like limited animation. There's like all the stuff that came before, whether it was Hanna-Barbera that was making it or,
yeah,
any of those things. There's just something about the Japanese stuff that resonated with me more, and like tons of other people. Like it was just, I guess at the time nobody knew what it was, but there was just something magnetic to it, and that just always like kind of like resonated with me,
yeah.
and and like I don't really forget a lot, and so as I got older and started like I guess having adult money or anything like that, it was sort of like I would go like buy these things when I rediscovered them, or like I've never actually thrown much of my stuff away from when I was a kid. So I have all of my original turtle toys. Somewhere in my mom's attic is a bunch of the other stuff that I grew up with. I think that something that happened to me early on growing up was like my house was like robbed multiple times.
Jeez.
And as a kid, I and none of this I really put together, but the first time it happened was actually a childhood friend of mine. But when my mom found out that it was him that did it, and he basically stole all my Christmas presents one year. That I, it was one of those things. Sorry, my cat's just running around all over my room.
It's fine.
It was one of those things that like I was so afraid of losing my stuff all the time, and then my house was robbed other times, but it was like these were like real robbers that maybe they might have stolen my Nintendo or whatever it was. But the first time it just kind of shocked me in such a way because it was actually one of like the best Christmases I probably would have ever had in my life, because it was when the Transformers 87 movie came out. So I would have had like a Rodimus. I think my aunt had got me a bunch of like really cool toys from then, and this guy kind of heard me, I guess, like bragging about it, and the reason why my mom, when she found out that it was him that did it, and never told me about it till I was much, much older, was because he was the one Vietnamese kid in the neighborhood. Okay. And he was like the one, like the friend, and like we weren't well off at all, but comparatively to them, we were wealthy, and so I think he was jealous at the time, and he was quite a bit older than me, but he just, decided that he wanted that stuff.
Yeah.
But it got me kind of weird, and it like, I think it strangely made me possessive of a lot of things much later. Like I think back and like, why am I so weird about toys or whatever? And it's probably that was one of those things that shocked me. But I think my house was robbed like 4 or 5 times growing up.
Jeez, dude.
So
I mean, there is something about the like scarcity or fear or something that makes it like you want to find security somewhere else or in other things, and in the lack of control. I kind of relate it like in sometimes when people get really hectic around food, it's like that's the one thing in their life they have total control over. And so like your toys or like those things, you have total control over them. And there was a time in your life where that didn't exist. And so now it's it probably plays out in different ways.
Yeah. But, you know, that was just something like thinking about this, like, and just, all the things I engage with in general. I was like, oh yeah, that's probably why I'm kind of weird about stuff.
Yeah. I mean,
Yeah.
tell me about you're surrounded currently by all types of toys. Like, people will see this and they will see, like, we've heard you talk about toys and those types of things. Other than what we normally had here in the US with all kinds of stuff, did you try to get your hands on some of those Japanese style toys from those shows? Did you even know they existed?
So I had little things here and there,
Yeah.
just growing up, and I kind of didn't know what any of them were really called. There was like a lot of like these like things that were kind of like model kits that I'd put together. And
Yeah.
it was all just Japanese inspired, but I'd just go to markets and kind of find bootleggy toys, and they were just the robots I watched. But it wasn't until like the late 90s that like much later I was sort of like bopping around, and there's a magazine called Giant Robot Magazine. And what had happened was they published an issue with I know him now. He's a great toy collector named Tom Frank, who he had these toys called Jumbo Machineders, like, and in America we call them Shogun Warriors.
Mm-hmm.
And there's a time where like I wasn't collecting much, but then that sort of gave a name to it. I didn't know that they were called Jumbo Machineders, and there was much more than the Mazinger and the Dragon and the Guy King that came out in the United States. And all of a sudden, here's this issue of this magazine that was like a Asian culture magazine.
Mm-hmm.
The first issue I saw was this with all these robots on the cover, and the magazine's called Giant Robot. And so I thought every issue was going to be about robots when I first bought it. And I started looking through. I was like, oh, it's just one article. But that one article was enough to like kind of set me down the path of like kind of like remembering all these things. And then, I've graduated from high school. I have like a real job at this point. Or like a job where I'm making some money. Like I'm still working at like pizza places and things like that. But like I can kind of spend money. And then, I don't know if eBay has really like come alive yet, but internet commerce is starting to happen. Like you're starting to find like websites. But with that one article and just knowing that they're called Jumbo Machineders was kind of what like helped open the door to like, oh, there's other stuff that I can look up. And then like in the early 2000s, Super 7 started as like a magazine. I don't know if you're aware of that.
Yeah.
And like Mark Nagata comes into play, and through a lot of that, I end up meeting guys like Mark or Buwana, that the toy collector artist guys, and we started building a little community through that. We saw vinyl and everything. Like I've started collecting all of that stuff at that time.
Yeah. I mean, so you're done with high school. You have talk to me about the art flair that exists in your life. At some point before, it's probably around high school, but before you even get to that magazine, there's something in you that's this creative spirit, right?
So in high school, I was always going to like concerts, and I was like a punker or in high school or whatever. And then there's a band called the Aquabats that I was really into.
Mm-hmm.
And then and they're like a costume, like kind of like a superhero act. And I was just really, really absorbed into them and everything. And then like the lead singer, Christian, he was really into the Japanese stuff. And so it's sort of like, I was talking about those kinds of things with him, it was like jogging all these memories. And here's a bunch of guys that were pretty silly, and that my love for toys and whatever, like, I'll say that I never really grew out of that stuff.
Yeah.
Like I was always collecting comics. I was always playing D&D. And it was one of those things is, I guess in high school and junior high and all that, I always had like a group of friends around me. and we always played D&D together. So like the idea of like getting beat up or bullied, like that never happened because we would just beat up the guys.
Yeah.
That like, oh, you're making fun of me because I'm bringing dice to school or whatever. And I never really did much of that at school, but everybody knew we were into that stuff, like magic cards and all of that. And I was lucky enough that I had sort of like a structure around me with like these 5 guys that I've always like sort of grown up with. Like we never changed high schools. Like as you know, like as you get older from elementary to junior high to high school, your friend group sort of like fractures.
Yeah.
Mine never did. It wasn't until like high school where like drugs and other things were involved that things shifted, but we never lost our love for like comics and like all the nerdy things. And so when I met up with the Aquabat guys, it was like, oh, here's a bunch of like guys that are older than me and they're still into this stuff. And so it was just something that essentially never left.
Yeah.
So fast forward a little bit, I start working with the Aquabats. And we're touring around and you know, so we're able to now like go to places around the United States that have toys. Like the vintage Japanese soft vinyl toys or the current soft vinyl toys, because companies like M1 and Marusan are producing toys at that time, bare model. And so we would just travel to these places because internet commerce hasn't fully taken hold yet, and so we would have to stop into shops like in Chicago or Portland to buy things.
So when you're with them, what's your job? Are you in the band? Are you merch? Are you roadie?
I'm merch.
Okay.
I'm like the merch guy.
We've all done some kind of merch job in our life.
Yeah. And for them, and like, because their stage shows are very elaborate, like I'm also like, I was like a high school wrestler.
Yeah.
And so they would have guy costumes with like beating up guys on stage and things like that. And that was me. I was the kid that I was the guy that they were beating up on stage or lighting on fire or whatever for a period of time. You know, and those guys ended up starting that show Yo Gabba Gabba.
The guys from Aquabats started that show?
Yeah.
Wild. Okay.
Yeah. So you could see like parallels with a lot of that stuff.
Yeah, real goofy. We're dressing up like superheroes in one, we're dressing up like monsters in the other one.
Yeah, and then that swings around because like, so designer vinyl, as like most people know it, you know, like I wasn't interested in that stuff. Like Kid Robot, all of that, I wasn't interested in any of that stuff. Because I just liked the sort of like the licensed Japanese stuff. And there was parts of it that I liked, like the bounty hunter things I was really into. Realhead, Gargamel. But when it got into like the American side, where like Americans were making stuff, I wasn't that interested in that stuff. And it wasn't until Americans started making toys in Japan that I was like, oh, this is pretty cool.
Yeah.
You know.
So when you're touring with Aquabats, doing these shows and things, it's like late 90s, early 2000s?
More early 2000s. Like,
cool.
like, you know, I was helping with like mail order and little things before. But yeah, it was more of like early 2000s, that I got more and more involved with them, on that level. But we were touring around, you know, more importantly, like I was just buying stuff, you know, like we would be on tour and, you know, we just pop into a store and there'd be some cool toys or whatever. And so I was exposed to a lot of that stuff like early on.
Tell me about Japanese Sofubi at that point. You hear tales of like dips in the market when it wasn't, like it just wasn't that popular or it wasn't as big. And so was it early 2000s kind of around that time? So
it gets like crazy hot for a while because, you know, I don't know when Kid Robot starts and all of that, but it starts getting crazy, you know. But I personally sort of like bow out at that time, and occasionally I'll pick up a toy here and there. But what ends up happening is while I'm doing the stuff with the band, and they start getting more involved with like Yo Gabba Gabba. We kind of like diverge. And at the time, I'm studying film a little bit,
Okay.
and I'm going to college, like trying to, thinking that I might make movies or something like that. And then I end up picking up a camera, taking like a bunch of photography courses because you gotta have to take electives at the same time when you're majoring in something. And I was
Yeah.
like, well, if I have to do like film stuff, like I want to make movies, why don't I just take photos too? Um, and that comes into play where I'm like, oh man, I love this, but all of my friends at that time too are starting like clothing brands, and because of my connections with like growing up with like a band that's like pretty popular, like people are sending us stuff, I'm meeting people, um and then I started telling people like, oh, I take photos too. And at this time, like I'm buddies with all the guys over at that clothing company, Paul Frank.
Mm-hmm.
um and then there's another company called Ruca, it's like RVCA,
Mm-hmm.
that's getting really popular. And something that people don't know about the Aquabat guys is that they're not really like partiers. They don't
Mm-hmm.
drink or anything like that, no drugs. And I felt very comfortable in that space. And so as I was going to a lot of these parties and things and like going on tour, because then it started extending out to like knowing other bands, I just am not a partier. Like I enjoy the social interaction, but I don't drink.
Mm-hmm.
And so I started bringing my camera around to a lot of places, and then I'm just taking photos of everything. And then eventually those companies started liking my photos enough that they're like, oh, can we just use these for ads for our clothing brand? And
Rad.
this is when like Vice is like getting into like early like party photography and things like that. um and so I was like, sure. And then I'm like, the trajectory of my life like changed drastically to where I was just like, oh, I thought I was going to try to make movies or something, but now I'm making like more money than I ever imagined in my life just with photography.
Yeah. Still in school, correct?
Yeah, I was
Okay.
still going to school, and then like it got to a weird point where like I remember having like a billboard or something like that.
With you
And
on it?
no, not
Oh.
me, but like my photo.
Oh, rad. Rad.
And like my teachers were just sort of like, well, we can't really teach you anything, like you're already doing it. And like I had worked on enough music videos at this point on the film side of things where they're like, oh, well, you're actually really doing the job, like
Mm-hmm.
like we can't teach you anything because you're actually, whether it's pulling cable or loading film or doing whatever, you're doing way more than anybody else. So stop coming to school, just submit whatever you're working on.
Yeah. Which is rad to get to that point. Because you're learning. There's something to be said about learning through doing and learning through sitting in a classroom. And
Yeah, and that was something that really fast. I was like, oh, this is insane.
Mhm.
Like going and taking film history courses, but then on the weekends I was just watching movies, like kind of like
Yeah.
the Tarantino theory, and just like watching them. And this was like early on. I actually have an autograph, I think from like '99, from the guy that was in the original Creature from the Black Lagoon.
Oh, cool.
And I just remember like watching the movie like with him and then talking to him about it. But this was before anything like that was really around.
Yeah.
I just really enjoyed watching all those old movies. And if there was a guy that worked on a movie that was just going to be there, like you couldn't keep me away at that time.
See, what's cool about this is a lot of this speaks into who you are now, which is, it's always fun to see the connections. So you are doing this stuff and toys haven't left your radar. You're traveling, you're doing all these cool things, picture on a billboard. You see the first, tell me about what it's like to pick up these first Japanese soft vinyl or Sofubi magazines where you're like, Like what you're collecting kind of morphs into. And then I mean Super 7 comes out around this time. So like what does that kind of change for you?
It's just really crazy because, I was really fortunate in high school that I had a friend of mine that was like, he was a Japanese guy that would like go back and forth and he would just bring us stuff. And
So sick.
he, and I didn't know what, like, let's say like Realhead or Gargamel or any of these things were. He just had them.
Yeah.
And he's like, oh, these are really popular. Oh, here's some t-shirts from Bounty Hunter. This is like when that company Bathing Ape was really popular, and he's like, hey, I brought you guys some t-shirts. Quang, here, I know you love Planet of the Apes. There's a company called Bathing Ape that like is like a fashion thing. And I didn't know how big they were or how popular they would become. It was just something he would bring to me. And I was like, oh, dude, sweet. Thank you so much. And I didn't know that those t-shirts were so expensive. He was just like a really wealthy dude. And it was cool. It was cool to kind of get that and not really know. And then years later being like connecting all those dots. And, I remember, through Super 7 magazine, you just see things like Marusan. They had like distribution in the United States with some of their Gamera figures, and I bought some of that stuff. M1 was like developing all of their things, and there's like B Club with the Bandai with the Bullmark reissues. Like there's all these things kind of going on. It was so super exciting, And then as eBay and more information and the internet starts happening, you start learning about all these other weird variations and like the vintage stuff, but then like I said, there's a few years where it's like I'm still buying things, but it slows down to like one thing a month, every other few months or something like that, because like photography really takes hold of my life. And it was through that, I'm like really getting into things, and then I become friends with the artist Skinner.
Yeah.
And this is fast forward quite a bit, but to like 2014, he basically is doing like a film marathon out in San Pedro.
Mm-hmm.
And then across the street is like a model kit store. I'm at this film marathon thing. It's like 24 hours. And it's like a Cthulhu con or something like that.
Cool.
And so I'm bopping over to like the model kit store. I'm looking around and I asked him, I was like, hey, like, you're painting toys and you're doing all these things. Like, I'm really interested in this stuff. Could I just buy an airbrush rig and you teach me how to like airbrush stuff? And you airbrush toys, airbrush whatever. And he's like, yeah, for sure. And so, and the only reason I know it's that specific day is because I remember we were at this convention and we were there for like hours upon hours. And it's just like, there's only so much like student filmmaking or amateur filmmaking on like the subject of Cthulhu that I could absorb at one time.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, it is a crazy thing to hook up with Skinner so early on. And because you're not even making toys at this point, or not even close to that.
I was just a fan. And because of my work in like the fashion industry, and I'll say that like during this era, I'm working for Ruca, and they're basically pairing me up with like art galleries and artists to work with. And like, I helped start I didn't help start it. It was already there, but I was like very early on in a company called Skull Candy.
Yeah.
Like a headphone company. I think I was like their 7th employee. And so there was a lot of that stuff going on, and art was always infused with that. So I was always looking for new artists to work with. Like with brands and things, like, because that was kind of part of my thing too, is that like as a photographer, I would kind of have to come up with themes and ideas of things I'd wanted to work on. And, I think that my work with Ruca really like infused a lot of stuff in my life where like I was always like looking for art and I was always interested in it. And he was one of those artists I was really attracted to. So we've known each other. I have no idea when we actually first started talking, but it was like, by the time 2014 rolled around, I think we had been friends for over 5 years at that point, or something like that.
Tell me why Ruca is doing gallery stuff, because they were sold in places like Quicksilver and PacSun and Zoomies.
Well before any of that, there was a guy named Pat and a guy named Conan, and I'm sure they had a bunch of other investors, because I was just a photographer for a period of time for them. I didn't know the intricacies of their business, but they were essentially originally like an art-driven action sports brand.
Mm-hmm.
And so they had a lot of incredible artists developing graphics for them, and it was sort of like this moment in time where like it was really the subcultural thing of like punk, skateboarding, art all being infused. And there was a lot of brands that were trying to like be a part of that, but none that were really pushing that like forward. And Ruca became that. And for a short period of time, they were really big sponsors for this art gallery called New Image Art Gallery in Los Angeles. And one of the gigs I had for the longest time is when they had an art opening, I would go help an artist do an installation there and photograph the whole thing, photograph the opening,
That's cool.
Yeah, it was a really interesting time, and I love it. I think back really fondly about it. I really didn't make any money back then, but it was just like one of those things that it was really beautiful.
Yeah.
And I was young enough to not care, like it was just fun to be a part of all that.
Did you, going through all this, did you end up finishing college in the midst of all this stuff?
Yeah, but it was really easy because at that point.
Hey, let's cut it right here. If you just went to DesignerCon, obviously I loved seeing you, and we can't wait to see you again at one of the other shows that we will be at this year. Thank you so much for stopping by and for all the kind words and everything. I love talking to people at DesignerCon. I love talking to people while we're boothing. It's one of my favorite things. If you saw on our table, the Yerman Kickstarter is still running. You got to sit and see the Yerman prototype and then see the test pool. And so we're really excited about that project. We funded in less than an hour and a half. Really cool to see that. And we would love for you to jump on and support that project, because more equals better stretch goals. And we're really excited. We have other colorways planned. And this long project with Ryan from Depressed Monsters is going to be unhinged. Now let's get back to the show.
Like, I think I was doing things that were considered so big that the school was just like, whatever, man. Mm-hmm. Like you don't have to do any assignments. Just show off an ad that you just did. Show a billboard. Show a music video that you're a part of.
Yeah. Did it almost feel pointless to go to school for that?
No. I'd say because the foundation that was laid.
Yeah.
Which was, and I'll say that I was self-governing enough because I had very serious things that I was working on. Mm-hmm. That like I had, like job deadlines as opposed to school deadlines.
Yeah.
And most of my peers at that time were so silly, or like they were much more interested in the social aspect of college than actually doing the work, that like, sometimes you need those things to just learn anything, mm-hmm. And there's a lot of stories of people that are, you don't need to go to school. You just go make something. But like not many people are disciplined to just go make something.
Yeah.
And that's where I think school kind of comes into play, is that like it teaches you some of those fundamental things. And then if you're personally disciplined enough where you can just learn off of YouTube videos, that's great. I just don't know a ton of people that are like that.
Yeah. To be in it is so different than to like sit in front of YouTube and try to absorb all the stuff. It's not as easy.
Right. And sometimes you need a little bit of hand holding to show you how something works. Like I remember because I was doing so much stuff through photography and I needed it done because I was working on advertising and things like that, that like I would just have to go read magazines because YouTube tutorials weren't where they were.
Yeah.
And so I didn't have the money at the time to like take courses or whatever. So there's like a thing called like Photoshop magazine.
Mm-hmm.
And so I'd sit in like Barnes and Noble or Borders and with like a pad of paper and just write down all the different things to like, oh, this is a technique how you clear skin, or this is how you crop photos, or this is how you do this and that. Like it was just really funny because I was just sort of like learning as I go.
Dude, I remember doing stuff like that in a Barnes and Noble because they would have all the every magazine you could think of, and they would always have chairs right next to it.
Yeah, yeah.
I'm never gonna buy the magazine if you put a chair there.
Yeah,
I'm gonna read the whole thing. It's crazy. I mean, Super 7 is several magazines deep in at this point, and you're starting to see the emergence of like US creators.
Yeah.
What does that do for your collecting? As we kind of just put photography to the side, the landscape of soft vinyl in the US is changing.
Yeah, it starts changing quite a bit.
Yeah.
And around, I'd say like 2015, I'm like, I've always been buying stuff, but then I'm becoming a little bit more interested. And that's where guys like Paul Kaiju and all that kind of hit my radar. There's a Lulu Bell and things like there's essentially like Americans that are now making Japanese stuff.
Mm-hmm.
And that's when I'm like, oh wow, this is actually really cool. This is like what I love with all the old Japanese stuff that I'd been collecting, the 70s stuff. But it's just like new and weird and original characters. And so I'm getting really like interested.
Yeah.
I never stopped buying things. It just like it would go into waves. And so, I just slowly start becoming more and more interested in it. And I'm already like airbrushing a little bit, but then Justin Ishmael ends up leaving Mondo.
Okay.
And then he moves to LA and we become, we know of each other and things like that. But then like when he moves to LA, that's when we really become friends. And he tells me that he's like, hey, I'm going to start making Japanese soft vinyl toys. And I'm like, well, I have an airbrush, like we can just paint, cause he's, he's talking to me and we're like, oh, like, how are we going to paint these things and everything. And so we start practicing on a lot of toys. We're buying paints and things from overseas and we're getting it going. And the process back then to make a toy, it takes so long.
Yeah, I've heard some of these stretches of like a full year to 3 years.
Oh yeah, we had a project that took like 2 years.
It's wild because we're doing it now at such a fast pace.
Right. And so what happens is that Justin and I, in preparation for this toy called the Galagantus, that it was like licensed with famous monsters that he was making, and we just knew that this toy was going to be huge at that time. Like everybody's interested in it. There's a toy called the Beamon. It's like a 2-headed creature that's selling for quite a bit of money. And we don't know anything. And so what we started doing is every weekend, him and I would just get together, no matter what. I mean, obviously, like if there's something going on, we don't meet. But if there's nothing going on, there's no excuse to not get together.
Correct.
So every week we're painting. And it gets to the point where it comes to the first 5 Points Fest. And
okay, so this is still before Creature Bazaar and still really before you're making. You're just painting at this point.
Yeah. Well, okay. I'm just like, I'm now helping Justin out and making his stuff.
Yeah.
And we're painting every week. We're working on things. The Galagantus hasn't come out yet, but he has some other like toy projects we're working on. I'm painting on some blanks and
First
things.
5 points out in New York.
Right. And I'm sitting there with a bunch of the New York toy makers, and I don't want to name names or anything like that. I'll name one guy in particular because I've told this story a few times, and so I'm just sitting there naively. I'm talking to these guys, and I'm like, man, like, so how often do you guys get together? Like, Justin and I get together every week, and we paint together every week, and just like it's great. We learn a lot from each other. Like Quang is sort of like experimenting over the week. And then Justin will come and we'll just show each other new techniques or new things that we're working on. And then everybody's just laughing at me. Like, it's like an audible, like, what are you talking about? Like, what are you, an idiot kind of thing? Like, never. We never get together. We're not even real friends. Like, we know each other from like events, shows, whatever, but like, we never associate with one another. And I'm like, oh, that's weird. I was like, yeah, I couldn't imagine. Like, Justin and I get together all the time. And after everybody leaves, the guy that comes up to me is James Groman.
Cool.
And he's just like, so you and Justin really get together every week? And I'm like, yeah, man, like, without fail. Like obviously, if we're doing stuff, we don't. But, like, for the most part, we get together every week. And he's like, I'd love that. He's like, that's incredible. And I was like, oh, yeah, James, like, feel free to pop in anytime kind of thing. Here's an open invite to you. And, it's just like a really funny sort of instance. And then that is probably one of the early moments that I realized that I was doing something different, because apparently nobody gets together. And I didn't know this.
Which, and we're going to explore this in episode in part 2, because this really changes, and I've seen it firsthand, how you interact with artists that you really like. And so,
well, I'll say that, like, somewhere in this mix, maybe it's a little bit later, but that's when, because at this point, like, I know of Paul, I bought a bunch of stuff from him.
Yeah.
And, like, I'm kind of like, oh man, I'd love to, like, hang out and, like, do stuff with you. And it's kind of sad because he was always really guarded around me, or like really guarded in general, I'd say.
Yeah.
And it wasn't until later his partner, Melissa, basically like coaxed him and being like, hey, like, you should hang out with Quang. Like, he seems to be like a really good guy. And what had happened was, prior, he would hang out with a bunch of people that would essentially like learn how to paint toys from him and learn all his little whatevers and essentially like ditch him.
That's crazy.
Like, and then, I'm I guess a little bit older than most that are in the scene, but like Paul and I share a lot of like things when it comes to like, oh, remember this show? Remember this episode of like MASH or something, something like that. And it's like, there was no way, and I think Melissa saw it early on, was that like, oh, I don't really care about the toys. I just like the dude. And but it was just something that she had mentioned to me. It was like, oh yeah, like there's all these people that like essentially were like he thought were his friends. And then once they could like milk him for whatever, they just sort of like left him.
And that's heartbreaking.
Yeah, it's awful. I mean, it's like, it's pretty horrible. But like, you kind of see that around. I mean, there's all these shenanigans behind the scenes. Like, everybody's friendly with one another, but it's just like, at the end of the day, it's just like it's every man for themselves. So.
Sometimes it shows, and maybe you can verify this or not. Sometimes it feels like it shows. There's one hand behind people's back holding a knife while they're smiling and shaking your hand. I don't know what that feeling is or where I've gotten that, but sometimes it feels that way.
I mean, the thing is that there's a community aspect of it, and we can kind of get into that later with some things. But like, there's also business.
Yeah.
And it's art, and it's competitive. I mean, artists love other artists, but they also hate other artists. and this will kind of get into some of the Creature Bazaar stuff, where like it, Creature Bazaar started as a convention.
Yeah.
I don't know if you know that, or if I mean, it's kind of gone for so long that idea has kind of gone away. But, basically due to the pandemic, it shut down.
Well, let's not get too far into that because that's episode 2. I do want to hear about you coming back off of your trip from 5 Points, because that's your first show that you're kind of going hardcore with toys. You're meeting people like James Groman and interacting with artists. You're like doing things that aren't really done. What's the vibe following 5 Points, that first one?
So that first one was when I first really, the guy that I really connected with at that show was Michael Scott on Draculazor.
Oh.
Like all of those guys would get along or whatever, but it's like that show was when we actually first met in person. And that was sort of like, it laid the groundwork for a future, for him eventually moving to California, But it was interesting to kind of see that and really key in on something like special that we had. And, I was doing shows already, selling various things. I owned a company that we would sell like enamel pins and things at various shows like Designer Con and 5 Points and things. And I don't own the company any longer, but that kind of like put me into the realm of all that stuff. Like it was always around, and it gave me the opportunity to just buy stuff, and so one of the things that really like I was always engaged with that community, and because I collected toys and people kind of knew I had a lot of stuff, that I was like a relatively like well-known collector at that point, and with all of those shows, when Designer Con eventually like moves to Anaheim, I live relatively close to Anaheim, and I started throwing these like decon after parties, and where all the artists would come, and you've been to my house. It's like the backyard's fairly large.
Yeah.
Well, large enough to like hold a bunch of people for a good backyard party.
Yeah.
And so that is something that sort of happens, and I'm kind of like, it's like a weird kind of like moment, like in a movie when the camera pans and you're looking at all the faces of all the different people that are there. I was like, oh, this is cool. Like, we could do something here, and at this point, Paul had been doing like SummerSlime, and I'd been going it's during San Diego Comic-Con, and I was like, oh, we could do something like that. And guys had been doing like small soft vinyl pop-up shows in LA.
Yeah.
And they're like one-offs, or they might have happened a couple times or whatever, but it's like, this is the moment where I'm like, oh man, I really could like do something. Like maybe we can do something here. And I had heard of guys doing like soft vinyl pop-up shows in their backyards, and I was like, well, my backyard's like perfect. And so, and maybe, well, I'll rewind a moment. Like, so I ended up meeting Brandon, one of my other partners at Creature Bazaar.
Yeah.
In 2017. And so, and we're starting to paint together. Like our little paint parties are getting like bigger. He comes over and he's painting with us. Ezra, who was one of the partners in Violence Toy, he was coming over to paint stuff, and it was really cool. And so, Brandon, and I'm getting some of the times mixed up, but I think he was standing next to me or whatever when I'm mentioning, like, oh man, we could do something cool. No, actually, no. It's actually a little bit later when I think he mentions it that we can do something. And I'm like, oh, we can do something in my backyard. And that's when he's like, no, we can go bigger.
Mm.
You know, and that's sort of like his. I might have like little like maybe like morsels of an idea, but he has the ability to kind of like take that and expand it in like a manageable way.
Yeah.
Where he's the one that's just like, you know, oh, we can go like bigger with all of this.
And this is right at the cusp of the beginnings of Creature Bazaar and all that stuff.
Yeah. So he kind of comes in like I know that I meet him. Well, I'll say that I actually originally meet him in 2015.
Mm-hmm.
Because I had hosted a Jack Kirby art show at a comic book store called Meltdown in LA.
Yeah.
It was like a gigantic comic book shop, and there's like a Jack Kirby. He worked on a project called The Lord of Light, and I had worked on this art show, helping promote it and exhibit it at Meltdown. And Brandon had come through, and you know, he was a guy that was super interested in the scene. I didn't meet him, you know, we hadn't become friends yet, but it's like, it's just funny that specific day, like we remember actually meeting each other. And then we meet like another time in between then, but it wasn't until 2017 that we actually really become like friends.
I think this might be a good place to stop episode 1 because I have so many questions and it's going to get us right into episode 2 of Creature Bazaar, SummerSlime, and your posse that you have built over the course of however many years.
Yeah. It's
well, I mean,
I hope that the first part like is something that's entertaining enough for. Like...
I think so because we don't often hear so much of it is when it's Quang, it's Creature Bazaar. When it's Quang, it's Paul Kaiju. When it's Quang, it's Justin Ishmael. We rarely get just like, this is your story. And so
Sure.
I'm pumped that you're willing to do that. So let's close this one out by doing the same thing that we do with the other ones. And please, plug some stuff that's coming up. You guys are about to be at some cool shows. We're going to see you there. So plug those things and we'll see what's up.
Yeah. So I don't know exactly when this is coming out, but we'll be at Designer Con, which is an insane, like, thing to get to, and we have some wild releases for that. We'll have the actual Creature Bazaar pavilion like we have at every Designer Con. And then we, you know, SummerSlime is actually up for sale right now. The tickets are online. And this will, you know, hopefully lead us right into SummerSlime. We have San Diego Comic-Con, G-Fest.
Mm-hmm.
But and for the first time we'll be doing a light exhibition of our stuff at the Geeking Out Toy Show. I believe that's in La Mirada, possibly. For those that live in Southern California, when you go up the 5 freeway, there's a place called Claremans that looks like it has like a snow-covered roof. It's like a restaurant. It's just right across the street from there.
Dude, that's you guys. You say it as if it's not a crazy amount of stuff going on, but it definitely is a crazy amount of stuff going on. Quang, thank you so much for coming on Toys on Tap.
Yeah, of course. Thank you for having me.